Okay, I hope that you were able to spend a good amount of time on chapter 4 doing the reading and the exercises and starting to get your head around some of these concepts. We're going to talk about data and variables today. And so this is all the basics of storing information for JavaScript, which is important. You have to store it in order to use it. So we'll talk about data types, printing to the console, detecting types and converting data. What is a variable? What is a constant? What's in a name? How do we go about naming our variables well? This concept of evaluating expressions, and you're going to hear me use this vocabulary a lot, evaluating. So it's important to understand what that means. We'll also talk about different types of operators that are used for calculating and evaluating expressions. And then the last thing we'll talk about is getting user input. How do you actually make your console interactive? This is a lot to get through, but we're going to do it a little bit at a time. So I'm going to start right at the top. Let's talk about data types. So the string is the first one you need to learn. Anything that is a word, a letter, a digit, a special character, you have to enclose it in either single or double quotes. And you can have quotes within quotes as long as they're not the same kind. So depending on what you need to actually display, you just choose the opposite quotes to hold the string itself for syntax purposes. And it can be very short, it can be very long, it can actually be empty. You can just have quotes with nothing inside of it, and that's still considered a string. The number, on the other hand, is positive or negative. You can have integers, which are whole numbers. You can have floats, floating points, or decimal numbers is what you're more accustomed to calling them. Doubles are just longer decimals. But here's the thing. In some languages, you have to have a bunch of different types for those. In JavaScript, it's just one type, number. That's it. So you don't want to use quotes. Otherwise, you now have a string instead of a number. And you don't want to use any commas, even if you have a very long number, where we might separate it, every 3 digits with commas. You can't do that in JavaScript. So let's do some examples of this. We're going to come over here and start with some variables that I've already declared. And I'm just going to change the values here to actually demonstrate the different types of strings you can create. Empty string is an empty string. I don't actually need to change this one because it's already exactly what I want it to be. There are no characters here. For space, you can have a space only. That's still a string. For Z or Z, depending on where you're from and how you pronounce it, we'll just have a single letter, Z. Farm boy would be Wesley. And I think you can start to see what today's theme is. The man in black would be the Dread Pirate Roberts, right? So multiple words. And then let's say we have a memorable quote. And so this is going to be an example of where I do quotes inside quotes. I actually want to display double quotes. So I'm going to use single quotes to enclose it for JavaScript. And then I'll be able to use double quotes and actually have them print out. So Inigo said, comma, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Everybody knows this quote, right? That will display. And I'm going to run this in a second and you'll see everything. And then if you go to Rotten Tomatoes and look up the score for The Princess Bride, you see that it's one of the highest scores ever. It's 97. So let's print this out. I'm going to make sure that I am in the chapter 4 directory here. That'll make it easier. And then I'll just say node data and variables and run it. And we get nothing because I haven't actually console logged anything. Hey guys, maybe we should do that. All right, let's console log that memorable quote. There we go. Inigo said, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die. And I have a typo, so let me fix that. Add that space in. There we go. And by the way, just because I'm geeky like this, I actually have my Inigo Montoya shirt on, just so you can see it. Yeah. I come fully prepared for the whole theme. I'm committed. Okay. So the number, on the other hand, we want to declare different types of numbers here. So a number of outlaws would be 3. Mostly dead, if we were to do it as like a percentage, we could say, oh, Wesley was probably somewhere around 0.985, 98.5% dead. And then his energy level after revival, I don't know how you want to quantify this, but let's just say we're using a negative number, negative 86. He's like, pretty low on energy. Okay, so those are all examples of valid numbers in JavaScript, and they don't require any different types other than number. Okay. So we talked a little bit about this yesterday because you already have been introduced to using the terminal, but with JavaScript specifically, the console is where you can execute your files, but it's also where you can see that output from the code, as we just witnessed. So you use console.log and pass in your content. So those parentheses this is eventually you're going to learn about functions. Log is a function that belongs to console. And when we say that you give it something to do something with it, we pass that in. So that's what when I use that terminology, that's what I mean. We're passing in some sort of content to console.log so that it can print it out for us. And so let's say I was to console log JavaScript. What am I going to see? You guys can answer.
JavaScript.
Yeah. And 365, I'm going to see 365, right? So these are all going to just display exactly the way we would expect them to. Okay. Sorry, I'm behind on my, yep, there we go. Behind on my prompts here. Okay, the last thing I just want to point out is you saw me use this with this little period in here, and we pronounce that, let me go back. We pronounce that dot. So console.log would be the proper way to say this, and you're going to have lots of things in the future you're going to learn where you're going to speak about things this way. I will say this is the craziest example for me to use for this because I probably don't say dot all that often when I say console.log. I say console log. It's kind of like the probably of English. We say probably, right? We don't actually say probably. So you'll hear me say console log all the time, but what I actually mean is console.log. Okay. Let's talk about special characters. I also gave you an example of one of these yesterday, but I want to talk about another one. An escape character is any sort of special character that you use a backslash with to indicate something special. And they have to be used as part of a string. Otherwise, they won't display if you have them outside of a string. So the new line character is \n. That will add in a line break and force whatever comes right after it to the next line when it actually prints out. The tab character, which is \t, will add in a few characters of blank space before it presents it. So let's say I console log A\n, B\n, C. What am I going to see in the console?
ABC on different lines.
Exactly. ABC on different lines. And then what about A\T, B\T, C?
ABC with tabs between them.
Yeah, they're going to be spread out. They're going to have a few characters between them. So you can, control your formatting, how you want things to look to the user who's looking at the output. And so let's do a couple examples of that. First, we can print a string, and then we're going to print a number. So I'm going to console.log iocane powder. And then I'll also print just, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, as a decimal number, sure. Okay, so come down here and run this again, and we see it, iocane powder and 123.456,789. Okay. So there's also this concept of detecting types and converting data. So the first thing, if you want to know what the type of data is, say you get some sort of variable that's coming in from somewhere and you just need to see what the type of it is, or maybe you need to check it because you need to know for logical purposes, which is something we'll talk about tomorrow. you can use this keyword type of, and it's all one word, and there's no capital O. It's just type of with a lowercase o there. And that'll help you find out what data type something is. And when you combine this with console log so that you can actually see the result, you will get a string that will come out. So if I were to use this keyword type of and provide different types of data here, oops, my bad. Provide different types of data like St. Louis, Missouri, or 20. What am I going to see for this first one? What's going to print out?
String.
Perfect, string. And what about the second one? Number. Yeah. So I sort of kind of hear that sometimes in the background, but thank you, Matt, for facilitating, because I can definitely hear you. Okay, yes. So we will see these, and we can, do some examples of this here. I've got these things here where, oh, I missed something. Okay, yeah, we have some formatting stuff here. So I've got this line of code here where I'm printing something, and I've got it commented out. I'm going to use this as a little trick that you can do. Command / on a Mac or Control / on a PC lets you uncomment and recomment things really quickly. You could do it across multiple lines too. So I'm going to uncomment this, and it says, it's this dialogue between Fezzik and Ego, right? And if I run this right now, it's all on one line, a little harder to read. So let's actually, break this up a little bit with some of this formatting. I'm going to put this on the next line altogether, put some space between this number that printed out above. And then here, I will add, right before the first quote, I'm going to add a new line and a tab. And then I'll do that before each of these quotes here as they go back and forth, doing this little rhyming game that they like to do. And a bonus feature, you'll notice that I also have another escape character that's already in here with a single quote. Anytime you need to do like an apostrophe that you want to display, but you also are using single quotes for the entire string for syntax purposes, you can use a / to escape that quote, which tells JavaScript, I don't want you to treat that as syntax. I want you just to print it out. So let's print it and see how this turns out. Okay, so we see Fezzik and Inigo. This is, that Vizzini, he can fuss. I think he liked to scream at us. Probably he means no harm. He's really very short on charm, and it's all on separate lines. Okay, I'm also going to put one last one there. Okay, so back to detecting types. We can go ahead and print the type of a string of characters to the console. So I'll start by printing something, right? And then I'm going to use this type of keyword and give it ROUS. Can somebody tell me what that stands for?
Rodents of unusual size.
Rodents of unusual size, yes. In the fire swamp, that's right. Okay, I can also, oops, I think it's actually down here, yes. I can also console log the type of a number, and just for kicks, we're going to do a negative number. So I will say type of -1. Okay, so let's watch these come out. All right, and it says string and number. Notice in the console that we know that this is a string. And the way that I display this on my slides is with quotes, just to emphasize to you that it's actually creating a string and not a number. But it doesn't actually say that, but it is in white, which on my console, on my machine, just means it's treating it as a string. If we were to, console log just -1, you'll notice that it's going to come out in a different color. And that tells you that you're printing a number. But yeah, these words, string and the word number, when you use type of, they come out as strings. So just keep that in mind. Okay, what about converting data? Oh yeah, I have a reminder here to be consistent with the use of semicolons. That's a good thing to remind you of. JavaScript, you may have noticed already, will compile and run just fine if you don't use it. But in most cases, but you need to get in the habit of doing it because any employer you work for is going to expect you to use proper syntax and to keep your code really clean and well formatted. So just get in the habit now of adding those semicolons, even if you can get away with not having them, do it anyway. It's just a good habit to be in. It will make you a good coder. Okay. So to actually change the type of your variable, this is possible. There are a couple of functions that you can use that are built into JavaScript that you can call them and pass in, a number or a string and have it converted to the opposite. So the function string will change data to the string type. And so you can do that with a number and it will become a string. Similarly, number will attempt to change something to the number type. As you can imagine, there are cases in which you might have something that cannot possibly become a number. When that happens, the value instead will be NaN. So this is a special value that's basically means not a number. I tried to convert this to a number for you, but it is in fact not a number. So if I try to use string and pass in 3.14, what am I going to get?
3.14 as a string.
3.14 as a string, yeah. And likewise with 3.14 as a string converted back to a number, I'll get it as a number, right? What about if I pass in the string pi to the number function?
NaN.
Yeah,
Not a number.
not a number, that's right. Okay, so let's look at a couple examples of this. We're just going to use some numbers that have nothing to do with Princess Bride whatsoever. So console.log string and convert 4 to a string. And then we can prove that it is what we think it is by using type of. So let's see how that comes out. Okay, so we see 4 and we see it as a string. It's in white, right? And we also are proving it is in fact a string once we use that to convert it. We can do the same thing with this string 10,000. Use the number function and pass in 10,000 in quotes and say, hey, can you convert that for us? And then I can do the same thing with type of here. And call it again. All right. And we get 10,000 as a number, and you can tell it's a number, it's yellow. Okay, what about Humperdinck? And this is clearly, we're back to our theme. So I'm gonna try to convert Humperdinck to a number. And you already know what we're gonna get, but what if I try to do type of number of Humperdinck? Anybody have any idea what I'm gonna get when I run this? It's just a guess. No wrong answers.
Not a number.
So we're gonna get not a number for this line, for line 75, but it'll be interesting to see what happens when we try to see what the type of that is, right? Let's try it. Okay, so we see not a number is the right thing, and you'll notice it's in yellow, and when we use type of, it tells us it's a number. So it's kind of interesting. JavaScript actually classifies NaN as a special type of number because it's basically just a placeholder for anything that it doesn't know what to do with, because it can't deal in imaginary numbers or in this case, a string that was tried to convert to a number. So yeah, for whatever reason, that's how that works. It actually types it as a number. But okay, let's go to the next thing. I want to talk about variables. What is a variable? So this is something that you can define in JavaScript to store data and then be able to refer to it later or use it some way. You always declare a variable with a keyword let. And that variable name needs to be meaningful. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And this naming convention, in this case, in JavaScript, is camel case, which just means that every new word that you introduce in the name has to have a capital letter except for the first one. That's lowercase. Value is assigned with an equals operator. That's how you assign, to store something in that variable. And then you might see in older examples of code when you're, doing research online, you might see this keyword var, VAR, but that's actually outmoded. They changed JavaScript a number of years ago and decided to start having everyone use let. It still works. It actually has a slightly different function. It behaves differently, but we don't need to worry about that today. We'll talk about that in like chapter 16 or something. So don't worry about that for today. Just always use let. Okay, that's what developers these days do. So in this example, I've got, let my class equal web dev. And the keyword is let. The name of the variable is my class. Equals is the assignment operator. And then the value we're actually storing in that variable is the string web dev. Okay. So I want to talk about vocabulary. There's this idea of declaring a variable and initializing a variable. You're going to hear these words thrown around. And when I was a student, I didn't initially understand the difference between the two, and I was a little confused. So one day I finally looked it up. I wanted to clarify that for you right now. You declare a variable when you use the keyword let and give it a name. That is you just telling JavaScript, hey, JavaScript, I have a new variable I would like to create for the very first time. Here's what it is and what it's called. And then you initialize the variable when you assign a value to it. And it's actually possible to do one without the other. You can declare a variable and just do it like this with a semicolon. And then later say, hey, I want to take that variable and I want to assign it with a value for the first time and initialize it at that point. There are circumstances under which this is something you'll want to do. You're going to learn about it later this week. But just so you know now, this is totally possible. You'll notice, however, that you never use that keyword let again. You only use it the very first time when you declare. And then after that, you just assign values without using let. If you do that, it's going to give you a syntax error. Again, this is the keyword let for the declaration and the variable name. Then later we take that variable, use the assignment operator and assign that value. And that's the initialization. Okay. So, when you want to change the value of a variable, you can do that as many times as you'd like. So you might have initialized it with a value of some kind, but later you want to change it, right? You don't use that let keyword again. You do, do this. So let's say I console log that variable that I declared on the previous slide, and I get JavaScript. But then I add a couple more lines of code. I say I want new language to now store the value Python. If I console log new language, what am I going to see?
Python.
Python, good. And let's say I change it again and say new language is C#. I console log new language, I get C#.
C#.
Yeah, okay. So you see how this works. You just keep reassigning different values whenever you need to for your own purposes in the code. All right, so now I have some examples to do. Let's come down here. And we're going to declare and initialize a string and print it. We'll do a number, and then we're going to practice reassigning some things too after that. Okay, so right here, I want to create a string called Vizzini phrase. If you know your Princess Bride, you already know what this is going to be. Inconceivable. I'm going to put an exclamation point in it. Okay, so we'll print that and just refer to the variable. So we have stored this information in the variable. Now we can just use the variable name. And when we run it, there it is. We actually see that value coming out from that variable. Let's do it again with a number. I use let, and I'm going to say number of times spoken. Notice my camel case where I'm using capital letters for each new word. And, oh, this is a number. I'm going to say 3. And then I'm going to say, you know what? I need to go look this up or rewatch the movie or something because I'm not sure that number's right. But let's go ahead and initialize it as 3, and we'll check that. And There it is. It's 3, right? I printed out, it has stored it in that variable name. Let's change it because we look it up and we go, oh, I actually found out that it was something different. So I can do number of times spoken and change it to 5. Okay. And then if I console log that again, now I run it and we see that it's 5. Okay. So it's, and notice JavaScript is executing from top to bottom here, right? So I console log it here and it takes whatever value I gave it here, but then I change the value. And now when I console log it here, it has the new value, but it's doing this sequentially from top to bottom. So keep that in mind when you are coding that, you know, for right now with the types of things that you've learned how to do, it's just going to execute from top to bottom. Okay. Declare another variable and then print before initializing. Okay, so this time we want to just declare it. I'm going to say let inigo response. And then I can log this. Does anybody know what I'm going to get? If I try to print this right now without having initialized it? It's okay if you don't.
You're not a number, syntax error.
No, neither. It's actually undefined. So anytime we have something that we've created and JavaScript says, oh, you've got something and I see that you have created it and that's valid, but I have no idea what it's supposed to be, it gives you undefined. That's another special value. We'll talk about that in the future too. So yeah, you weren't supposed to know that, so don't feel bad if you didn't. Okay, so let's initialize it now so that we actually give it a value. I'm going to not use let. I'm just going to directly name the variable again and use that assignment operator and say, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. And then we'll log that to verify that it has been changed. Okay, there it is. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. All right. So that's a variable, and that's how you work with them to change their values and such. What about a constant? The idea here is that you have something that you just don't want to ever be able to change it. You want it to retain the original value that it was initialized with. So it stores information, but the value is protected. It can't be changed. You declare it not with let, but with const. This is a new keyword. And you often will see that instead of camel case, it's the convention screaming snake case is used. You see that in a lot of different languages. It's kind of a common convention. I prefer to use it most of the time because for things like this, because I like it to be super obvious. This is a constant. Later when I see it, when I don't see the you know, if I'm not looking at where it was declared and I don't know what the keyword was that's used, this tells me later on in the code, oh yeah, that's a constant. So screaming snake case is what that's called. It's very useful in situations where you just want to make sure it's never altered. So in the business world, this is a good example. We use the keyword const, and then we have Euler's number, which is used for a lot of things. It's used in compounding interest, for example, in finance. That's our variable name. I've got it in screaming snake case, and then I've assigned the value 2.71828 with the assignment operator, and there's that value. Okay, let's do a quick example of this. I'm going to declare a constant, and I'm going to use this screaming snake case. So const movie title, and I'm going to say The Princess Bride. Okay. Let's see what happens when I try to assign a new value to this, right? I just say movie title, and I say some other title, and then I run this. So let's try running the program. I don't even need to try to print it. That doesn't matter. If I try to run the program right now, just having attempted to reassign a value here it gives me an error and it says, it points out what line it was on, it's in the data and variables.js file at line 109. And it says, you tried to assign this, but it's an assignment to a constant variable. So it won't let you get away with it, which is really good. That's what we're trying to do, is protect it so it couldn't be changed. Okay, now to keep from seeing this error so that I can keep executing things after this, I need to comment this out. So I'm going to do that. All right. Let's talk about naming variables and constants. You always want to be descriptive, but still concise, but descriptive. Readability these days is more important than length. I remember a time decades ago when length was a consideration. You were very limited on the amount of characters that you had for a variable name. So you kind of, could only do so much. But these days, readability is more important. You want to avoid confusion with other variables, make it specific enough to where it can't be confused. You want to make it clear, really obvious what specific information it's holding, what data type it is, which sometimes you can actually tell based on the name what that is. And you don't want to use keywords like let or const or function. You're going to learn a bunch of keywords in the future. You don't ever want to use those as variable names because they're reserved. JavaScript will not let you use those as variable names. So we have an example here, IC Flavor, and that's just not really a very useful name. A better name would be ice cream flavor, like just spell it out. Scoops, that could mean lots of things. Maybe it's a list of all of the different types of scoops, but in this case, I actually intended for it just to be a number of scoops. That's a better name, right? Type, oh man, type could mean anything. So let's say we're being specific. We actually want to know what the type of cone is for this ice cream cone. So these are better names. Let's look at a little bit more of this with our Princess Bride examples. So we've got a book, The Princess Bride, S. Morgenstern's classic tale of true love and high adventure, the good parts version. Okay. The name is William Goldman, type is adventure, kind is hardcover, and books is 10. These are very weak variable names. So let's come up with better names for this, right? I'm going to copy these and bring them down here. And for a minute, JavaScript's going to be unhappy. Actually, VS Code is unhappy because I am trying to, declare variables that have already been declared. But that's okay. I'm about to change their names. So a better name than book would maybe be book title here. So I'm being specific about what it is that I'm referring to. Name would be like author or maybe even book author. Type, you could use genre or book genre, depending on how specific you're trying to be and what the context is. And then here, hardcover is really, kind of doesn't help us, but format might be better. So we'll say, book format. And then here, when you're talking about books, you could be talking about a lot of things in terms of numbers, or a lot of things in terms of just books. But I actually do mean for this to be a number, and specifically, it's the number of copies available. So that's a much, much better name for this. So just keep that in mind when you are creating your own names. You're going to have assignments where LaunchCode is going to give you the names they want you to use. That's fine. Use their names. But they're also going to give you assignments where you can make them up. So when you make them up, make them good, make them descriptive and specific. Okay, we are going to take some questions and then we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come back and do some more. So who has questions for me?
Is there a specific time that we use screaming snake case over camel case?
It's a matter of choice, because you can do either for a constant. You'll see people do it both ways. This is what I'll say. Again, I prefer to use it because it is, then later on, I know for sure I'm working with a constant. But really, this type of thing is where when you go into a job and you're working in an existing code base with a bunch of developers who've been, working on this a lot longer than you want to pay attention to what their conventions are. Your company is generally going to have, specific ways that they want to do things and keep it consistent throughout their code. So just pay attention to that. And if they use screaming snake case, use screaming snake case.
Can you go over how to comment and uncomment quickly again?
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to want to get used to this because it's so helpful. Okay, let's say I'm going to comment all of this out. I can select this entire block of all these lines and use on my Mac, it's command slash. On your PC, it'll be control slash, and just do and undo it just like that. You do not need to sit there and edit all those slashes. And if I want to do just a single line, I can just place my cursor anywhere on that line. I don't actually have to highlight it, and then I can do that. Highlight and unhighlight, or comment and uncomment. Anything else?
I don't see any more hands.
Okay, great. All right, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we come back, we will talk about evaluating expressions and operators. All right, welcome back. Let's talk about evaluating expressions. So what is an expression? What do I mean by that? An expression is basically just lets you use code to solve a problem. You can create an expression to combine values, variables, operators, and more. And together, JavaScript can evaluate that. So it can be as simple as just getting the value of a variable and just using that variable name. It could be complex with multiple operations. So we say that the expression is evaluated by JavaScript, and then we say that the resulting value is returned. So you're going to hear me use these words a lot, and I just want to make sure you know what they mean. We take an expression of variables and operators and evaluate it, and then JavaScript gives us that value. And of course, the only way you can see it is if you want to like print it to the console, right? But that is what you're printing is the result, that returned value from the expression being evaluated. So here's some examples of expressions. Some string all by itself as a variable is an expression, 1 + 2. 3 times some number, and then that product is then added to 14. My name is plus my name. So we're going to get into how all of these work in a second. But these are all examples of expressions to be evaluated. So when you are evaluating expressions, there's this concept of hard coding something. If you use just the raw value and don't use a variable of any kind, we call that hard coding. So again, another vocabulary word that you're going to hear me use, and you're going to wonder, what does that mean again? So generally speaking, to make your code flexible so that it can work with new values, you're going to use variables most of the time. And that way it can represent any value in its place. So an example of this, I have a variable, I say let name equal John. Okay. And then I console log, hi, Mike. What am I going to see?
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike. But what happens if I console log hi and name?
Hi, John.
Hi, John. Yeah, because that's what I actually stored in the variable. And now name can be whatever I need it to be. And when I console log this, it's just going to represent that. So that's the difference between hard coding and using a variable expression. So let's say later on in the code, I change name to Anita. Now I'm going to see.
Hi, Anita.
Hi, Anita. All right, good. Okay. If you want to use an expression, there are different ways to use it depending on where you place it in your code. So you can evaluate an expression right in place, or you can store that return value in a variable and use it later elsewhere. So storing it in a variable is generally a good idea if you think you're going to need to use that value more than once. So an example of me doing this in place is just console.log 6 times 8. If I do that, it's going to evaluate 6 times 8, and I'm going to get 48, right? Let's say I decide instead that I want to multiply 2 numbers together, but I want to store it in a variable. So I have let product equal 5 times 6. And then I create a second variable, and I say let sum equal 10 plus product. If I console log product, what do I see?
30.
And if I console log sum?
40.
Right. Okay. So you see how I can put these things together and then have those values stored in ways that I can just go get them whenever I need them now. And if I needed to use one of these multiple times, all I have to do is use the variable name, and I'll keep getting whatever was last stored in that variable. Okay. So I want to talk, before I do any more live coding, I want to talk about some operators because there are a bunch of different ones. There are, basic arithmetic operators are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. These are the symbols we use. For exponentiation, the double asterisk is the same way of saying to the power of some number to the power of something else. So for example, double asterisk 2 is squared, double asterisk 3 is cubed, right? And then you can use this with any number you want, depending on what your math requires. To increment and decrement, this just means to increase by 1 or decrease by 1. So we use plus plus to represent increasing by 1, and minus minus for decreasing by 1. Let's go over and do some examples of some of these things just so you can see it in action. And we're just going to use some basic stuff, very straightforward. So for this one, it just says, print the difference between A and B. So all I really need to do here is console.log and then just say, I want, A minus B, right? And it should take these values. And then if I print that out, we get 5, right? 7 minus 2 is 5. Okay, now we want to take this value M and print it to the 4th power. And it says in this case, create a variable so we can store it, and then we'll print the variable name instead. So I'm going to say let M to the 4th power be M asterisk asterisk 4. And then I can just log the variable. And we'll see this come out as 2,401. All right. So incrementing and decrementing. There are different ways to do this, and I want to kind of show you how this all works. So we're going to print x plus plus, and then we're going to print x to see what it is after that. So does anybody, if x starts as 5, does anybody know what I'm going to see when I print x plus plus, and then what I get when I print x?
Six and then 5.
Okay. I like how you're thinking, but it's actually going to be the other way around. It's going to be 5 and 6. So here's what just happened. Let me explain to you why. We said we want to, this is actually a command, essentially. You're telling it, I want to increase the value of x permanently. So, but because we put the x first, it actually prints it first and then increases it. So then when we go back and we check the value of x, now we see it was in fact changed to 6. We just didn't see it while we were evaluating it in place. So this is a tricky thing about this. If I then say, okay, what if I was to console log plus plus x? What am I going to see then?
You're in 6 and 7.
Well, yeah, so we already see 5, 6, and now we're going to see 7. Yeah. So in this case, it was 6, but then we incremented it and then printed it. This is how JavaScript reads this. So if you ever get confused about whether to put the plus plus before or after, if you're doing something like this, if you actually need to use that value while you're doing it, you just have to keep in mind that it's going to evaluate differently depending on whether you give that command to increment it before or after the variable name. There's only going to be so many instances in which you'll run into this sort of thing, so I'm not too worried about it. We primarily are going to be using incrementing when we get to loops in a couple classes. Okay, so I'll just do a couple examples here of decrementing. We're going to do it again. Okay, and oh, I see I had one more thing here. Yeah, okay. That's okay. I'm going to move on. So let's just do this. Console.log, we get y minus minus. So we're still going to see 19 when we do that because we're actually printing the variable before we change it. But now when we print it, we should see it changed. And then when we do it again, but this time we actually say, hey, change the value first and then show me what it is. We should see it incremented again. Okay, so 19, I'm sorry, decremented again. 19, 18, 17, just like that. Okay, let's move on. Modulo. So this is a special operator that allows you to get the remainder, and it's a percent sign. We call it mod for short. That's how we kind of say it when we're talking about the expressions. But it means that you're taking some number, the modulus, and actually taking a bigger number and dividing it by the modulus, which is, some number. And then that remainder that comes afterward is what the modulo produces. So here's an example. We have 44 blocks here. I'm saying 44 mod 8. That's how we say that. So again, the percent sign is the modulo, 8 is the modulus. And we have 5 perfect groups of 8. And then we have 4 left over. So if I evaluate 44 mod 8, what am I going to get?
4.
4. Yeah, great. That's the idea. This is the concept of the modulo. So the practical application here that you'll probably come up against pretty soon when we're doing like logic and things like that soon is to determine if a number is even or odd. So tuck this one away because you're going to need it. If a number mod 2 is 0, then that means that it has no remainders, right? So it must be even. But if you take that number and you say, mod 2 and it comes out as 1, then you know that it must be odd because there was a remainder. So that's going to be a very, very common thing that you're going to want to use modulo for. Okay, we can do a couple examples here. We want to print the remainder from 100 with a modulus of 7. So I will console.log, and I'm just going to evaluate this in place right here. 100 mod 7. And we'll see how it comes out. And we get 2. Because 7 times 14 is 98, and 100 minus 98 is 2. That's our remainder. Same thing, if we print the remainder from 6 with a modulus of 2, so 6 mod 2, we're going to get 0 because it divides evenly, right? It divides evenly by 3. So perfect. Okay. Order of operations. Does anybody remember PEMDAS from school way back in the day? So parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, and then addition and subtraction. This is how you remember the order of operations. And JavaScript uses these same exact rules for evaluating expressions. So if we were to give JavaScript this expression to evaluate, I'm going to break it down by how it would evaluate a little bit at a time. So we might start out with this very complex, reasonably complex expression with a lot of different math going on. The next step, JavaScript would say, okay, I'm going to ignore the 8. I'm going to ignore the minus sign and the 36 and the division. I'm just going to look at these things in parentheses because parentheses come first. And then within those parentheses, I'm going to pay attention first to the exponents. Those come first. Once I've evaluated those, we have a simplified expression. And now this one, it's back to just evaluating the entire expression inside the parentheses because that can be simplified to a single number now. Over here, we still have a little bit more work to do, but we have rules for this. Multiplication comes before subtraction. So I'm going to evaluate this one first and then simplify again. And now I have 14 minus 8, and that entire thing can be simplified to 6. This one already is simplified to 6. So now we have, we're just down to this final simplification. We have multiplication and we have division. Both of those take precedence over the subtraction. So we multiply this, divide this, and we simplify to 48 minus 6. And that, of course, gives us what?
42.
It gives us the answer to the ultimate question of life, universe, and everything, which is Douglas Adams, in case none of you know that reference. I can just go ahead and I'm going to uncomment this and just print it so that you can see that JavaScript does this in a split second, like super fast. 42, boom. But that's how it evaluates it. It breaks it down like this, little bit by bit. Okay, so keep that in mind, because if you ever have to do something a little bit complex, you have to understand how to tell JavaScript to do it in the order you intend for it to be done. So this is the same thing as you learned in middle school, probably. Okay. Even with strings, this is going to be the way that it evaluates. So speaking of strings and using those as part of an expression, how do we go about like putting strings together, like creating a string of other smaller things? We can combine them with a plus sign, but when we use it with strings, it actually becomes a concatenation operator. So concatenating just means, taking one string and adding it to another one. If you have both strings and numbers included in the expression, and you may sometimes do this, in fact, it's likely you'll do this. As soon as JavaScript encounters a string, it starts treating everything as strings from there on out, from left to right. So let's look at these examples. The first one, I just have y plus e plus s. What am I going to get?
Yes.
Yes, correct. If I were to do 1 plus 2 plus the string 3 plus the number 4, what do you think I'll get for that?
334.
Yes, good. 334. Yeah, because JavaScript doesn't know that you have strings in there just yet. It's going from left to right. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 plus, oh, there's a string. So now it's going to do 3, 3. And then from there on out, it's just going to treat everything like strings. So if you ever have a whole bunch of numbers that you're doing together, but you want it to be a string, just make sure something at the beginning is a string, or you can use that string function to convert it to a string, the entire thing. You have options, but I just wanted to make sure you understood if you ever have a weird result, that's because this is how JavaScript does it. Let's see, we've got an example of this. So we have two variables, let title after marriage be princess and let original name be Buttercup. We want to put these together. So I can console.log title after marriage, and I can do original name. Now, what's going to happen when I do it this way? Am I going to get what I expect? Let me run it. So we get it, but you'll notice there's no space between these two pieces, right? When you are concatenating strings, you need to be careful to pay attention to that, because generally speaking, a lot of times you're trying to build a phrase, like an actual English phrase. And so you're going to want to make sure you have spaces between the two variables, as if they do not already have spaces in them. So now that we run this again, we're going to see Princess Buttercup with the space between. So keep that in mind when you're formatting text. You're sometimes going to need to do that. What happens if you have a mix of string and numbers? So we're just going to do another example of this. So I'm going to say let number of ships. Hang on a second. Gotta move something out of my way. There we go. Let number of ships be 4. And then I can print a sentence. Now I'm going to build a whole sentence bit by bit, so bear with me, but I want you to see me do it slow because I want you to see how it's done. So I'm going to create a sentence. You write, and then I'll concatenate number of ships. That's not what I want. Number of, nope, that's also not what I want. There we go, number of ships. I have a lot of variables in here. Okay. And I put a space, copies of a letter. I'll send my, and then I need to put a space and concatenate number of ships again. Oh goodness, there we go. Okay, number of ships plus space, fastest ships, one in each direction. Spoken by Prince Humperdinck. And he was lying. Lying. Okay, so let's print this. So we have a nice sentence. You write 4 copies of a letter. I'll send my 4 fastest ships, one in each direction. Okay, so that's how you make, a nicely formed sentence right now. Now, there are other ways to do this. You're going to learn about something called a template literal when we get to chapter 7. It's a little nicer to make it more readable. This is harder to read. You have to really kind of focus on everything as you're going through. But we'll get there. But for now, this is all you need to know. And remember, you can combine this with those escape characters. So if I wanted to make sure there was a space above and below this, I could put a /n in this first string. And at the very end of this string, I could put another /n. And now when I run it again, I see, it's separated out a little bit, which is better for readability. So just some things to consider. Okay, let's talk about compound assignment. So this concept of compound assignment is that there are some shortcuts with JavaScript syntax for when you want to just assign a new value to an existing variable. Mathematically speaking, although you can use this for strings too with the plus sign. But let's just look at it in terms of math. If you use plus equals, that says, I want you to add and update the existing value of something. So if I have x plus equals 4, that means the same thing as saying, take x plus 4 and now store that value in x. We just want to increase x by 4. And now x has a new value. Same thing with subtraction. It works the same way for all of these basic arithmetic operators. So you can multiply this way, you can divide this way. You'll probably find yourself doing addition the most and subtraction second most. And every once in a while, you might find yourself doing something like multiplication or division. So we can do an example of this. Let's say number of boos is 3 because we're watching that scene, where the lady is booing Buttercup. But after she asks the ancient woman why she's booing her, she boos 5 more times. So we need to increase the variable, the value. So I'm going to just say number of boos and then just say plus equals 5. And then when we log this number of boos, we should see 8, right? So we started out with a value of 3 when we declared and initialized it, but here we decided to go back and change the value. So I just said, take the original value and add 5, and then just update it, store that as the new value. So now anytime we go to reference it, it's no longer going to be 3, it's now 8. Okay. Our last topic, and we are doing really good on time. Wow. Okay. Our last topic is getting user input. When you want to interact with a user in the console, you can do that, but you need a special library for it. So we're going to need this readline sync library. That's what it's called. It's something that we add as a dependency to our program, and you only have to import it once at the very top. So you remember yesterday, I showed you how to do that npm install, and it created these extra files, right? So if we revisit this package.json file, this is where it defined that we needed this dependency. We need readline sync in order to, available in this directory so that when we go to import it in data and variables.js, it will be available to us. So we've done that work already. It's there and waiting, but we still have to import it in the file. So we'll do that. And then you want to assign it to a constant. Can you assign it to a variable? Sure, but you don't really want to, because later on you might be working with your program and starting to take in some of the values that are coming in. And let's say you decide to use the name input again to store the value of what the user is giving you. You might accidentally try to do that and use the same variable name. You don't want to overwrite that representation of that library. You want to make sure that it's always available so that you can use it again. You only have to import it once and then you can use it multiple times. So assigning it to a constant will prevent you from making that mistake of using that variable name again. It does not have to be input, but you can name it anything you want. Input is just a very common one. I'm going to use that consistently just so you see that, okay? There is a special method, a function that gets attached to input that comes from that library called question. It has parentheses because it is a function. And when you call this input.question and give it some sort of expression between the parentheses there, it's going to do two things for you. First, it's going to print whatever you have between the parentheses to the console. And that way it's very much like console.log. That's the first thing that it does. But it has a second function. It actually returns whatever the user puts into the console and hits enter. But you want to make sure to store that in a variable so that you can use it. Because doing input.question by itself, they can respond, but the return value from evaluating that as an expression needs to go somewhere. So this is typically how you're going to want to do this. At the very top of your file, you will say const input, and that's that representing this library. And then we're just going to require readline sync. That's how we import it in a basic JavaScript file. Later on, when we get to working with more modern JavaScript and React, you're going to learn about a new way to do imports. But for now, we want to use require. This is a keyword. So that's how you import the library. And then to actually use input, you can declare a variable to store that response because it is going to return something. And then use the assignment operator and evaluate this expression, input.question, and then just say, enter your name. So it's going to print, enter your name in the console and wait for the user to actually type something in and hit enter. And then when they do that, it comes back and it stores that value in the variable name. Okay, let's do an example of this. I'm going to close this and get back to here. Okay, so something to keep in mind, when you're in development, when you're just developing your code, you have to play the role of the user. No one else is checking this for you, right? So you kind of play the role of the developer and the user. So you're just going to be testing your own code. So you're going to watch me do this right now. The very first thing we want to do is import the readline sync library. I did say that normally this would go at the very top of the file, like we might put it way up here. But for right now, I'm going to keep it right here just for reference because there's so much in this file and I'm teaching it. So we'll just put it right here for now. Not import, sorry, that's modern. What you need to do for this type of file is const, and then we'll call it input. Again, you can use any name you want, but for consistency's sake, I'm always going to use input for this. And then require, and I say, read line sync like that. And it will go get that library and assign it to this so that we can make use of it. So now we want to print a greeting to the user. We can print anything we want. We're not asking for feedback just yet. We're just going to introduce what we're about to do. So I'm just going to use console log. And this is a normal thing to do. You're setting it up to be able to ask them something, even if you aren't asking just yet. So I'll just say, let's see, I'll go ahead and put my semicolon there. Let's see. I'm going to use some formatting to actually, nope, I'm not yet. I'm going to go ahead and just do this. Welcome to the Princess Bride fan club. Okay. So I can print that and then I can ask them for their name, right? And so that's not a console log. Getting ahead of myself. This is where I can do input.question, but it's going to bring something back. I have to store it. So when you're getting input, always start with declaring a variable to store that value. So let favorite character. Wow, I'm really ahead of myself. Oh, you know what? This to do is wrong. No, it's not. Yeah. I'm sorry, guys. I changed this a while back and I forgot that I changed it. And so I'm like mentally in my head going along with something completely different than what I actually intend to do now. Okay, what I meant to do is say, let's just ask the user for their favorite character. So we'll say, let favorite character Wow, okay. That input a question. And then I'll say, you know, who is your favorite character? And question mark. And I'm going to leave that just like it is so we can see how that comes out. And let's just go ahead and try it. Okay, let's go ahead and run this. Welcome to the Princess Bride fan club. There's our console log. And then the next line, who is your favorite character? This is the input question. It's waiting for me. It's got a little, you know, thing here waiting for me to type something in. And I'm going to say 100% Miracle Max because Billy Crystal is hysterical. Okay. And there we go. The program is done executing. So I took in the input and it's even stored in favorite character, but I haven't done anything with it yet. Let's use it. Let's find a way to use it. So I'm going to actually just print something that includes that input. I'll say console log and say favorite character, favorite character plus and question mark. That's my favorite character too. Okay. So I'm going to run this again. Does anybody else have a different favorite character other than Miracle Max? Somebody want to give me a name?
Inigo Montoya.
Absolutely. Okay, Inigo Montoya. Inigo Montoya, that's my favorite character too. Okay, so we see how we can get the response, store it in a variable, and then use it. And we have that to refer back to whatever we need it for. And right now we're just using it for a sentence, but later you're going to learn some other ways that, you know, you're going to need user input that you're going to be able to use for much more important reasons. Okay. So let's do it again. We'll do one more. I will do another input question. So I need another variable to store a new value. I'm going to say let six-fingered man equal input dot question. And then say pop quiz. Nope, I don't mean to end my string just yet. Let me come in here. Pop quiz. Who is the six-fingered man? Okay. And then I will print a response that includes that. And I'll say that's correct. And then concatenate six-fingered man plus was the man Inigo was looking for to avenge his father's death. Okay, let's print it. Let's go. All right, who's my favorite character? I'll just put in Miracle Max so we can get to the next question. And Miracle Max, that's my favorite character too. Pop quiz, who is the six-fingered man? Someone? Anybody remember?
What was that? Count Lumen?
Count Rugen. Count
I
Rugen.
obviously don't.
Yeah, Count Rugen. So it says that's correct. Count Rugen was the man Inigo was looking for to avenge his father's death. Okay. Now, what if you had gotten it wrong and you had said Count Lumen? The problem with this output is that it still says that's correct, and it says that, right? That's because we have not yet learned how to do logic. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a bonus mission here, just like they're going to start giving you in your studio exercises. When you do your reading today, you're going to learn how to do this. So if you want to fork this repository and play around with this code, you can. The main branch has the starter code. The solution branch has the solution. I already have the solution to this bonus mission, but your job, should you choose to accept it, is to figure out how to give a different response depending on whether it's correct or not. And that's going to be things that are covered in chapter 5. Okay, there's one more thing I want to do here though. Did you notice that this is kind of hard to read? It's kind of messy and like crammed together, right? Let's use what we know about formatting with escape characters to clean this up a little bit. That's going to be the last thing we do. Welcome to the Princess Bride fan club. I'm going to go ahead and put a \n in front of that. And then for my first question that I ask the user, I'm going to separate that out a little bit. And then I could just put a space here so that, Miracle Max isn't crammed up against the question mark. but I actually could also just go to the next line. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to indent it so that their answer is actually kind of separated out a little bit. Then let's do the same thing again. Now here's one of those instances where I told you that if you want to use an escape character at the beginning, but the first thing you do is a variable name, you're going to actually have to add a string just for that. So I'm going to put quotes and \n and then concatenate it in front of the variable name. And now I'll have that new line in place. And then at the end of this, let's see, favorite character, that's my favorite character too. Yeah, so then the next one, I'll put another line before this one. And then here again, I'm going to push the user response to the next line and tab it over. And then here I can actually put, a little bit of spacing around this sentence too. Okay, let's run it again. So who's my favorite character? Miracle, Max. Who's a six-fingered man? Count Rugen. All right, see how much easier this is to read? For those of us who are old enough to remember text adventure games from the 80s, super fun, which these days, there's actually a whole kind of subculture of people who still write these things. These days it's called interactive fiction. I used to, it's the first thing I ever learned to code long before LaunchCode. I played around and learned a system called TADS and wrote a couple of little text adventure games. Which made me feel all nostalgic from my youth. But yes, so this is kind of what you would have to think about though, right? Is formatting to make it easy to read. So as long as you guys are working with programs that run in a console, and you will be for a while, until we finally get to web pages, in about 15 more chapters or something, you're going to need to think about this formatting, making it easy to read, okay? All right. Who has questions about some of these things that I've just talked about?
What was that? The add update? Can we see the add update function with the strings?
Yeah, the compound assignment right here.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So right. So the concept here is you take an existing value and you go back and just update it, doing a plus equals, and say, I want to add 5 to that and store that new value. So now when we console log this, it comes out as 8.
Can you do it with a string?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was the question. Hey, okay, sure. Let's see. Let's do it this way. I'm going to come up here and find a new way to do this one. How's that? Okay. So, let's say we have, let, princess name, and it starts out as just princess. And we want to actually, update it. I can say princess name plus equals, and then I can say add a space and also add original name like that, or I could hard code it if I wanted to. And now when I console log princess name, I should see the same result as I get from doing it the way I did it here. So let's run it. There it is, Princess Buttercup. Does that help?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions?
Where is this repo located for them to look at afterwards?
Yes, okay. All right, I'm gonna break the fourth wall here. Hold on. Okay, in my slides, there are tons of hidden slides where I have screenshots of things. And on every single one of those, I have the link to the code here, where you can go directly to this repo. And it will open it up and take you there. And you can see here that I've got all my different chapter folders. This is the same one we were working with yesterday. And you can see I've got the solution branch here. So you can use the main branch to code in, and if you want to go back to the videos and code along with anything, or just take a stab at it yourself, you can do that from the starter code, or you can switch to the solution branch if you just want to view the solution. You don't even need to like fork and clone this to view the solution. You can just do it on here. So we can come here, for example, and I'm not going to look at, I'll do it. Okay. But I'm not going to show you the bonus mission because I don't want you to see the end. Okay. But you can see now I've got this whole solution, and this is what I was referring to the entire lecture, because if you thought that I had this all memorized, it did not. I was referring to this the entire time. But yeah, all of this is here, so you can go back and view it anytime you want to. All right, I'm going to put this back and jump to here. Okay. Any other questions before we do this?
I don't see any more hands.
Okay. All right, I actually need to go back one. Okay, so on my website, I showed this to you yesterday. I have practice problems. If you just want to get more practice on completely different topics, because maybe it's actually possible for someone to have too much Princess Bride, that's totally cool. You can go to my website and look these up. These particular ones are filtered by topic, data and variables. And you'll find 4 of these that are specifically kind of the things that we've covered today. So, but it'll walk you through them again, give you more practice. There's both starter code and solution code. These currently exist on replit.com. You can get a free account. This is what LaunchCode used to use before we just decided to start with GitHub from the beginning. So that's why so much of my early stuff is still on Replit. But these actually have video walkthroughs too. I actually did recordings of these a while back. So if you want some quick tutorials and some extra practice, these are here for you.